When my grandparents died, we covered the mirrors in their house, but I didn't ask why until later. You covered the mirrors so the soul doesn't get confused about which direction to go. When this film was released in 2005, I saw it but missed this detail. And the first thing I noticed when I rewatched it, before the hoodoo, before the twist, before any of it, was that every mirror in the house was gone. It was covered, or stored in the attic. The house has been in a state of mourning for 80 years because the people who died in it never left. And just like that hidden room, I'm going to prove that this film followed the wrong person for its first 80 minutes. Once you see it, you probably won't watch this movie the same. This video is about what I found when I went looking for that detail in this film. It took me through a maze of suppressed history, hoodoo, Zorona Hurston, stories Hollywood rarely tells, leading me to a question I still don't have the clean answer to. A skeleton key is supposed to open every door, but when it doesn't open the door that matters, what is the house hiding?
I told you about the mirrors.
I needed a mirror for my bathroom, and so
I told you and you heard me. No mirrors.
I want you to count the amount of times that Caroline performs a hoodoo ritual while insisting she doesn't believe in hoodoo. Count it. The film tells you its own rule early. It only works if you believe. Because by the time we get to the attic scene, the number is going to tell you something this film never says out loud. And ultimately, you have to decide, did she walk into the trap, or was she always already inside of it? The answer is actually what the critics missed. The twist movie Error, Sixth Sense, 1999, post The Others, gave every critic in 2005 the wrong lens. They were watching for the reveal, so they missed what was happening in front of them the entire time. So what were we actually watching for those first 80 minutes, and why couldn't we see it? The same way Tales from the Hood's skull with gold teeth poster buried what the film was doing, the genre keeps getting misread, often framing the wrong person as the center of the story. You recognize the house. In many of these films, we'll see the same house over and over again. The swamp in the film, the one that feels like it's been there for centuries, was actually made up. In other words, the real Felicity Plantation is land-bound, but for the purposes of the film, they added a swamp in the backyard. But here's what I do know. The history underneath that is not fabricated. I want you to hold something before we go any further. There were two people who were outside this house in the 1920s, and by 2005, the same house is still there. This is Legacy of Folktales. We find old stories in new movies. This is part 3 in our 20 video series on plantation horror, a new subgenre of Southern Gothic. Make sure you subscribe to keep following our progress. This is The Skeleton Key, 2005, directed by Ian Softlead, $43 million budget, $94 million worldwide. Critically, it was received as a serviceable thriller with a good twist. Critics generally were unkind to the film, with a 38% Rotten Tomatoes score and a 58% popcorn meter. With time, many people have re-examined The Skeleton Key as an underrated horror gem. And some other more recent reviews have different opinions. Would the reviews been kinder if the story was told from another character's perspective? A skeleton key opens any door. It's the key that belongs to no room. It's the one that bypasses the entire question of whether you were invited or not. And Caroline uses it to enter a room whose history she has not been initiated in. What does it cost to enter a tradition you didn't come from? What does it cost the people whose tradition it is?
I think folks don't understand about sacrifice. Sometimes it's more of a trait.
What happened in between is the actual story. The horror of The Skeleton Key is in the 80 years of patience it took to build that trap. What we see is the last chapter. So we made a study guide and a whole video showing how they created the swamp, the house, and all this for Skeleton Key. It's on Patreon, link below.
I've been waiting for you, Caroline.
Every character in this film has a function. Mama Cecile runs the visible labor. She makes the trap look like a household. Papa Justify is the legal framework. He makes the estate legible in the outside world.
Listen, when I introduce you, just let me do most of the talking.
And then there's Ben, who's already occupied before the film begins.
His words have gotten lost and wandering in his mind. Let the water run down. Push away this condition.
It's actually one of the challenges, is the fact that he doesn't say anything.
Ben can no longer recognize himself, and the mirror is the one thing left in the house that tells him who he actually was. That's why they keep it away from him. His helplessness is the proof of concept that the system can actually work if someone can only believe.
Oh, you don't believe in this stuff?
I don't, but I'm not just gonna mess around with it, so you wanna go in? Go ahead.
And Jill, Caroline's friend,
Jill's from New Orleans, so she's just freaked out by the whole idea of it being out in the swamp and being away and stuff. So I'm not really a fan of her working there, but you know, $1,000 a week is a pretty good gig, so I can't really knock her for that.
Joy's part in the film is really to be the voice of reason. She's the voice of the audience. She's
is there to tell her and warn her that this is not what you think it is. And Caroline, she's the recruit who does not know she's being recruited. She's motivated in part by the guilt of her father's death. It's the emotional entry point that allows her to want to give to people in their last moments. And right now, we want to just underscore that both Gina Rowlands and Peter Skarsgård's characters are essentially, they've soul swapped. And this is a way that Papa Justify and Mama Cecile are able to maintain the trap.
There was a banker here. His name was Thorpe. He made his fortune cheating the poor. He was a mean man. He was a cruel man. It was him and his family and a couple of servants. Name of Mama Cecile and Papa Justify. Sit down. Now, that was their room. Oh, well, they were famous all through the bayous. They healed the sick and they hurt the mean. But old Thorpe, he just saw him as help. He abused him. Until one night, as the story goes, there was a party.
The mirrors are in the attic, and that's where they stay. Violet was once Caroline. The system predates every living character in this film. Caroline, she's an iteration of a pattern that's been running for 80 years.
Try to use my tricks on me?
But what built the system in the first place? This is where we start to get a glimpse into the other story Skeleton Key was not able to tell. The actress who plays Mama Cecile is Gerald Prescott. She's got a Winston-Salem connection. Not only was she an associate dean at Wake Forest in the late 90s, she has a master's in African American literature from North Carolina A&T, which means the woman who plays Mama Cecile spent years teaching African American literature in my hometown of Winston-Salem before anyone put a camera on her. She didn't enter that tradition from outside. Now let's talk about what Caroline walked into. And the person who documented it most vigorously spent 5 months doing it the right way. Zora Neale Hurston went to New Orleans in 1928. She was there for an assignment, collecting African American folklore in the South. And trust requires time. She was initiated. And even after all of that, she wrote that the practice is bound in secrecy. Her exact words. Thousands of adherents, none of them advertising. Access requires trust. Hurston earned it. Caroline is the inversion of Hurston. Hurston spent 5 months looking at herself in the practice before the practice let her in.
I've seen the room.
Caroline does no such thing. She enters the tradition from the outside, without initiation.
It's not locked anymore. No, child, you don't know what you've seen. Well, you're going to tell me right now, or I'm leaving.
Here's what that survival looks like inside the house. In the tradition Hurston documented, mirrors are thresholds, surfaces that hold the reflection of everyone who has ever looked into them, portals between the living and the dead. And when my grandparents passed, who happened to both be from South Carolina, and they both passed in their house, we covered the mirrors. The first time I saw that rendered on screen was in a short film, Bree Newsom's Wake. Now, Bree Newsom's name may sound familiar, the woman who climbed the flagpole in South Carolina and took down the Confederate flag. She's a filmmaker first. Wake is a 2010 short film, 21 minutes, North Carolina, Southern Gothic, about a woman who conjures to get what she wants. She knows she's conjuring, she just doesn't understand what she's inviting. The demon tells her, "You called this, and then you're responsible for the consequences." It's the same rule every black character in Skeleton Key seems to communicate to Caroline. Jill tells her, the woman at the laundromat tells her, the former hospice nurse tells her. They all know. The difference between the woman in Wake and Caroline is that the woman in Wake at least knew what she was doing. Caroline didn't even know she had already started. It opens at a death vigil. The film won the Outstanding Independent Short Film Award at the Black Reel Awards. It screened at Cannes. It's linked in the description. Newsom knew this tradition from inside. On second look, tell me if you think this red circle here is actually a covered mirror. I think it is, but it would make sense that at a wake, the mirrors would be covered. You don't call on certain forces without initiation. If you do, prepared to be responsible for the consequences, whether you understood what you were doing or not.
That room up there, you just don't go in and throw things out of a room like that. You leave them just where you found them. The house is theirs just as much as ours.
The mirrors in the Skeleton Key are not set decorations. The mirrors are covered because Cecile and Papa Justify never left.
The house is his. You're not from the South. You won't understand.
Gina Rowland's character Violet tells a story to Kate Hudson's Caroline about a thing that took place right on the property. Although this is a movie, it echoes into history in Louisiana. The suppression of hoodoo practice in the South was not a metaphor. It's been documented. Practitioners were surveilled, arrested, and in some cases, killed. In Louisiana, the practice was never directly banned. The state used proxy charges, fraud statutes, and assembly laws. For instance, in 1927, a practitioner named Samuel Kojo Pierce was persecuted in Missouri for using the mails to defraud. His crime was selling hoodoo potions by mail order to black Southerners seeking employment and protection from racial terror. That was a charge. Voodoo and hoodoo were feared precisely because they were seen as tools workers used to invert prevailing social hierarchies. The suppression was always about power. And that's the backstory the film compresses into until the finale. Black spiritual practice suppressed by violence. It went underground, and underground it became something the dominant power structure couldn't touch.
Ghost stories really are about a crime in the past that is unavenged or deserves retribution.
What do you think? It may push the lead characters of the stories to the margins. Softly has said as much himself. In the bonus features, he called all ghost stories a reckoning with the crime in the past that's gone unanswered.
I thought it was interesting to kind of juxtapose a small, specific crime with the notion of crimes that have been committed in the formation of a country.
Now, while that may be the history, we know that the intent of both Cecile and Papa Justify is to find a soul to sacrifice so that they may extend their life.
Thing folks don't understand about sacrifice. Sometimes it's more of a trait.
So the tradition survived underground.
They were famous all through the bayous. They healed the sick and they hurt the mean.
One of the recurring issues in the Skeleton Key are the black characters know not to mess with the hoodoo. And I think a lot of that comes down to intent. While hoodoo is used and has been used as a way to fight the power structure, it's hard to know the intent of the practitioner and what scales they are using. Gina Rowland's character says that Papa Justify and Mama Cecile would help the poor and hurt the mean, but leaving your eternal damnation to the whims of someone else has consequences. Consequences that most people say don't mess with. Every black character in the film tells her to leave. Jill tells her, the woman at the laundromat tells her, the former hospice nurse tells her. She cannot hear it. So what is the question the Skeleton Key is actually asking? Did Caroline enter the tradition, or did the tradition enter Caroline? Because the film's answer is that by the time she picked up the key, the tradition had already decided her role. Her intentions may have been good. Her guilt about her father was valid. None of that mattered. That is the operational logic of the trap.
You in danger, girl.
Two creators saw what the critical establishment missed when discussing the Skeleton Key. This video, 250,000 views, reads the film from inside the culture. Black with Yaya reads it as a practitioner. You couldn't see it without the knowledge, and she had the knowledge. But those are both linked below. Brooke Obie, a black girl watching, called this one of the worst horror films she'd ever seen. And the argument is that the film uses black historical violence as atmosphere while keeping the camera on the white protagonist. What do you think? But here's what that argument and the structural reading put together. The camera not following the other folks is also the film's twist. The plantation doesn't harm the people passing through it. It teaches survival techniques that replicate its own logic. To show their full story would require the film to acknowledge that what they were doing and what was done to them was structurally identical. The film cannot look at that directly, neither can the genre. So the film knows the problem, and it still follows Caroline, which means the question isn't whether the grammar works, it's whether the grammar working is itself a problem. The Skeleton Key arrives in 2005, between Beloved in 1998 and Get Out in 2017. A 19-year gap in which plantation horror existed, but had no name and no critical framework. The white protagonist, she is the audience's visa. What the Skeleton Key does differently, it punishes that choice.
I told you I wanted a black one this time.
You know the black ones never stay.
Caroline's whiteness is not her protection, it's the recruitment. The film uses the white protagonist convention and then dismantles it from inside, but only at the very end, and only through a twist that critics filed under clever rather than structural argument. Almost every reviewer lands on the same comparison independently. The Skeleton Key is called the white Get Out, the reverse Get Out. That framing makes Skeleton Key a footnote to Get Out story. It subordinates the film's own argument to someone else's. The Skeleton Key is not a precursor to Get Out. It is asking a different question entirely. And that question has everything to do with history and remembrance. The Skeleton Key follows a familiar pattern you see in other Southern Gothic stories like Pigeons from Hell. In these stories, the frame seems to be an outsider comes to the South, enters a house, and has no awareness of the house's history and the dark things that may have happened there. And so either their ignorance or in some cases their arrogance seems to be their downfall when they come into this region.
All that circle protects is you from leaving it. Doesn't work if you don't believe.
And still, Caroline does everything right. That's what makes this inescapable. The trap wasn't waiting for someone who broke the rules, it was waiting for someone who followed them. And to answer that question, we have to go back to the rituals. Remember what I asked you to count. How many rituals did you count? Because here's what the film never says out loud. Belief was the mechanism for getting Caroline to perform the rituals. The brick desk that Caroline laid while calling it psychology, it still worked. Violet didn't cross it. The reversal spell she sang over Ben, the protection circles she drew in the attic with her own hands, every ritual worked. The hoodoo did not care whether she believed. The moment she said, "I don't believe," in the attic, she was already standing inside a circle she had drawn.
This is your spell of protection.
We've been waiting for you, Caroline. Waiting for you to believe. It doesn't work if you don't believe.
It seems like belief doesn't even require a set action. It just requires enough belief to know that whatever's going on here could harm you. That's the answer to the question. Did she enter the trap or was she always going to be inside? And maybe the trap was built to make these two things indistinguishable. Access without initiation, it's the trap. And this review is even more pointed in saying, the Skeleton Key is an elegant, unsettling picture, one that unapologetically picks at the racial wounds many white Americans would rather leave smoothed over forever. The joke is on them. Cecile and Papa Justify won completely. New bodies, new names. The legal documents already transfer the house.
She meant so much to them. Her being here.
Why do you say that?
They left her at the house.
The operation continues. So here's a question I said I was going to leave you with. Before I do, if this landed, the This Is a Haunted House shirt and the Skeleton Key Study Guide are both on Patreon. Link below. They survived the plantation by mastering its tools. Hoodoo was protection. The domestic space was the trap. Is that freedom? The mirrors are still covered, and the house is still in mourning. The next caretaker will arrive at a house that has always been waiting, and they still won't be able to look at themselves. Patience was a weapon across 80 years. Cecile and Papa Justify remain inside, now wearing the bodies of their new hosts. Many things can be true at the same time, and the plantation system didn't end. It just learned how to put on a different skin. Here we go again with skin as weapon, which we started in Tales from the Hood with Zora Neale Hurston's line, "Not all skin folk are kinfolk," and this is the film that shows you how. The Skeleton Key gets closer than most in telling the other story. What was taken from Cecile and Papa Justify, their selfhood, their body, their name, that became the weapon. That's the inheritance. But Southern Gothic horror keeps centering the guilt of the inheritor. The horror is what the house does to people who come near it, not what it did to the people who built it, who never left. Beloved understood that. That's the exception that proves the rule. Plantation horror has the tools to tell that other story. Hoodoo was survival, documented, decades of it, and still the drama arrives the same way. Somebody at the front door holding a key that was never theirs.
This is not your house.
In fact, a key that seems to give access to everything while also trapping you at the same time. The skeleton key followed the wrong person. It knew it was following the wrong person, and it punished her for being followed. Antebellum is a film that takes that last line seriously. The plantation didn't end. Someone just built a new one. And the film that found it was working inside a genre that wasn't built to investigate what it discovered. That's the next chapter. I still wonder what Skeleton Key would be like if it focused on the perspective of Papa Justify and Mama Cecile. This has been Legacy of Folktales. We find the old stories hiding in new ones. And sometimes those old stories are the ones we're still living. Thanks to the folk legends and Patreon members who continue to support this work. Consider joining our Patreon if you want additional behind the scenes footage, study guides, and essays. Thanks for watching.